Most people think the worst thing a family can hand you at Easter dinner is a casserole you didn't ask for. Mine handed me a contract, 18 pages, cream cardstock, printed at the kind of place that does wedding invitations. It was sitting beside the ham like it belonged there. 10 adults, 1 chandelier, 1 blank signature line, with my name underneath it. They thought they knew who I was. A divorced woman, a quiet daughter, the agreeable one. They forgot I read contracts for a living. By the time I reached for my pen, my mother had already stopped breathing. Welcome to Calm Drama Story. Get comfortable. The people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. I had been back in my own apartment for 11 months. That is approximately how long it takes a woman to stop flinching when the phone rings. The place was a 1-bedroom above a dry cleaner on Ridge Street in a town of 9,000 people and 1 traffic light that blinked yellow after 9 at night. Rent was $640. The ceiling sloped in the bedroom. The radiator knocked every March. It was mine. I was 41. I worked as a paralegal at a family law firm 2 blocks from the courthouse. I read documents for a living. That Sunday, I had tax returns on my kitchen table and the kettle on when my Aunt Lillian called. "Your mother has been quiet," she said. "In a way, I don't like." I told her Mom was probably just tired. "Helena," my aunt's voice dropped. "Your mother does not do quiet. Your mother does strategy." I laughed. I put the kettle back on. But Aunt Lillian had been reading weather for 60 years. She could smell a storm through a phone line. Before she hung up, she said, "Easter's in 2 weeks." I said I'd be there. In our family, that wasn't agreement. It was a receipt. Before I tell you what they did, I need you to understand something. My sister Margaret was not a monster. She was a woman who had been told no 3 times by her own body, 44 years old, elementary school principal, the kind of woman who sent Christmas cards with a family portrait and matching sweaters, especially when there were no children in the frame. She and Trevor had tried for 10 years, 3 rounds of IVF, $118,000 out of pocket. I drove her home from her second egg retrieval, and I held her hand in the clinic parking lot while she cried over a blueberry muffin. I had genuinely grieved for her. You can grieve for someone and still refuse to fund their next idea. The previous Thanksgiving, I had overheard my mother in the pantry talking low to Margaret. "She isn't using her body for anything right now," my mother said. She, meaning me. Her body, meaning mine. I had been standing in the hallway with a serving spoon in my hand. I swallowed that sentence whole. The way you swallow a pill sideways, knowing it's stuck, knowing eventually it'll work its way down. I had been too busy being reasonable about it. My mother called on a Thursday. That was the first warning. My mother called on Sundays. "Helena, honey, Easter dinner, 4 o'clock. Oh, your father wants to see you." My father had not requested to see me in 11 months. My father was not in the habit of requesting. My father nodded. "The whole family will be there," she continued. "Trevor's coming. Uncle Don is flying in from Ohio. Just a lovely evening. Nothing stressful." I wrote the word stressful on my grocery pad. I underlined it. In my family, nothing stressful has preceded every funeral, every firing, and 1 restraining order. After she hung up, I stood at my sink and let the water run. Then I called my aunt back. "I think we need to have coffee this Saturday," she said. "I've already made a pie." That was how we agreed in our family to prepare for war. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the firm's contract template library. I clicked on a folder labeled Surrogacy. I read for 2 hours. When my Aunt Lillian lived 11 miles outside town on a farm her late husband had left her. Orchids on every windowsill, purple on the south side, white on the east, yellow in the kitchen, where morning light came through a mason jar. She grew orchids the way some women keep secrets, quietly, patiently, with a spray bottle and 0 commentary. I drove out Saturday. Cherry pie on the table, coffee already poured. "Your mother called me Tuesday," she said. "Asked if I thought you'd ever considered having another baby." I set my fork down. "I told her I thought you'd stopped having that conversation with this family." My aunt looked at me with her pale, patient eyes. "Times do not change, Helena. People just get bolder." She told me then a story I had never heard, about being 19 years old, a pregnancy, and a choice her own mother had refused to use the word for. She had kept it inside her for 53 years and delivered it on a Saturday morning over cherry pie. When I stood up to leave, she squeezed my hand. Whatever they ask of you, read it. Don't just listen. Read it. I said I would. Page 4, she said. Things always live on page 4. Easter Sunday, 3:47 in the afternoon. I pulled into my parents' driveway. 5 cars. My father's Buick, my mother's Taurus, Margaret's Forester, Trevor's truck, and a silver rental Impala with a sticker from the Cincinnati airport. Uncle Don had flown in from Ohio and not told anyone it was for me. Uncle Don was a family lawyer. I sat in my Corolla. I counted the cars twice. 5 cars. 4-person dinner. My mother had invited witnesses. Oh, which meant my mother had invited a verdict. I got out. I walked up the front path. I rang the bell. My mother opened the door too fast. Her smile was too wide. She hugged me harder than she had in 3 years. "Sweetheart," she said. The word sweetheart had not been deployed since 2018. I filed it. Inside, the chandelier was blazing at 3:50 in April. My mother had bought that chandelier for a funeral. It stayed. Trevor shook my hand like a man trying to remember if he'd locked his car. Margaret stood in the archway in the blouse I'd seen her wear once before, at her 10-year anniversary dinner, her asking for something blouse. Uncle Don gave a small wave from the couch. He did not stand. He did not speak. And then I saw the folder, cream-colored, thick, placed on the sideboard beside the platter with the ham, and as if the two belonged to the same meal. Someone had taken the time to align the paperclip on the corner. In the living room, my second cousin's daughter, Ellie, 7 years old, was watching a Pixar movie with the volume up. My mother had put her there on purpose. Ellie would not hear what came next. We sat down, my mother at the head, my father opposite, Margaret and Trevor on one side, me alone on the other, Uncle Don 2 chairs down, spaced so the distance would feel incidental. We talked about the weather. We talked about whether it would snow one more time. Trevor's leg bounced under the table at a rate I could count. Margaret did not touch her wine. My mother kept glancing at the folder on the sideboard. I had learned young that my family never came to the point directly. They circled it. They asked about your job, yet your apartment, your car's mileage, and then once you exhaled, they laid the point across your plate, like a knife beside a fork. My mother cleared her throat at exactly 3 minutes and 6 seconds. "Helena, honey, your sister and Trevor have been thinking about something. A way forward for them. We wanted to talk to you about it as a family." I set my fork down. I smiled the polite smile I keep for firm holiday parties. "All right," I said. My mother spoke for 2 minutes and 40 seconds without taking a breath. "I know, because I counted. Helena, we are a family. We believe that family takes care of family. And right now, your sister is in a season of hurt." She paused in the exact place a paragraph break would have been. "Altruistic surrogacy, a gift of love between sisters. Modern medicine has made it basically safe. What's in you, sweetheart? You're in a season of transition yourself. It could be a time of meaning." Then Margaret. She had a tear ready from the left eye. She took my hand across the table. "Helena," she said, "you're the only one who can do this." My sister had been practicing her suffering in the hallway mirror since 1989. By Easter, she had it down to 1 tear, left eye. On cue, I let her hand stay on mine. I did not squeeze back. "You're the only one who can do this. In my family," has always meant, "you're the only one we haven't already used up." "I need a minute to understand what's being asked," I said. My mother's face changed. The soft voice dropped. Her jaw set. "Helena, your sister took you in when you had nowhere to go. You owe her." The word owe. She said it with the exact cadence she'd used in 1996 when I'd forgotten to return her sewing scissors. I looked at my father. My father nodded. I looked at Trevor. Trevor looked at his plate. "It's a gift, Helena," Margaret said. "Not a payment, but we do hope you see what this family has done for you. After everything." After everything. The divorce, the 42 days in her guest room, the $900 I had paid toward groceries during those 42 days. The kitchen I had cleaned twice because cleaning a kitchen is how I apologize for existing in it. I did not raise my voice. I did not raise anything. My face did not change. I folded my napkin. I set it beside my plate. I smoothed it once with 2 fingers. I'd like to see whatever you've prepared, I said. My sister's hand moved to the folder before I finished the sentence. She brought it across the table like she was serving me a dish. And I understood right then she had rehearsed that movement multiple times in this very room with my mother watching. The folder was 18 pages of very good paper, not printer paper, cream cardstock, the kind they use for wedding invitations. Someone had paid for it. The title page read, Altruistic Gestational Surrogacy Agreement. Underneath, in smaller font, between Margaret Ann Caldwell, intended mother, and blank gestational carrier. The blank line was for my signature. They had not filled it in. That detail alone told me something. I'd like to read it now, I said, if you don't mind. My mother laughed once, short, false. Oh, honey, you don't need to read every word. Oh, Uncle Don had lawyers look at it. It's all standard. I looked at Uncle Don. Uncle Don did not look at me. I'm a paralegal, Mom, I said. You can always tell a contract written to intimidate. The margins get thinner around the clauses that matter. Trevor, very quietly, let her read it. He did not look at my sister when he said it. My sister's head turned toward him 1 small inch and stopped. I opened to page 1. I flattened the spine with the side of my hand. I began. Page 1 was a cathedral, architecture of kindness, vaulted ceilings of gift and family and love. The word altruistic appeared 4 times before page 2. In my line of work, that's roughly 3 times more than necessary. Whereas the intended mother, Margaret Ann Caldwell, has undergone 3 unsuccessful attempts at in vitro fertilization, totaling $118,427. Margaret flinched at the number. I noted it. I kept reading. And whereas the gestational carrier, being a sister of the intended mother, wishes to provide a gift of love to her family, the parties hereby enter into this agreement freely, without coercion. Without coercion. I did not say the word aloud. I filed it. I kept my face still. I kept my voice flat. Page 2 introduced the money, which is where altruism historically begins to perspire. Reimbursable expenses, carefully itemized, $4,200 per trimester for maternity clothing, paid to Margaret. $800 a month for dietary supplements, paid to Margaret. Mileage to and from appointments, paid into a joint account in Margaret's name. Parking fees, plus meals on clinic days capped at $24. Nowhere on page 2 did money flow to me. I did not comment. I read on. Medical communications were to be handled by the intended mother. The gestational carrier hereby authorizes the intended mother to receive on her behalf all communications pertaining to medical care, prenatal testing, and clinical recommendations. On her behalf. I would not be receiving my own medical information. I would not be calling my own doctor. I would not be getting my own test results. I would be, legally speaking, a room with a refrigerator, to which my sister held the only key. I turned to page 3. Page 3 asked me to hand over my body, 1 sentence at a time. Mandatory diet, mandatory weekly weight check. Well, mandatory bed rest starting whenever the intended mother's physician, not mine, recommended it. Mandatory prenatal vitamin brand, specified. No substitutions without written consent. Travel restriction. No drive exceeding 2 hours from my home without the intended mother's written authorization. Mandatory psychological sessions, bi-weekly, with a counselor selected by the intended mother. Clause 8. The gestational carrier agrees to abstain from all elective medical decisions without prior written authorization. Let me tell you about the word altruistic. Altruistic is a very well-dressed word. Altruistic owns a good blazer and sensible shoes. Altruistic will sit across from you over honey ham and green bean casserole, look you dead in the eye, and smile warmly, while its other hand reaches under the table for your uterus and $118,000 worth of indemnification. Altruistic is the name greed chooses for itself when it's being photographed. I did not say this aloud. I said it only in the kitchen of my own head, where my aunt was standing with a spray bottle, nodding. I turned the page. My father had finally looked up. He was watching me, and I could read, not his expression, but that he knew we were 1 page from the last page. I could read that he had counted. That was when I understood. My father had read this contract before Easter. and he had not told me. Page 4. My aunt's voice in my head. Things always live on page 4. I breathed in. I pressed the crease flat. Clause 10 was 12 words long. Most of the important sentences in my career have been shorter than a grocery list. Upon implantation, the gestational carrier waives all parental rights to the embryo, fetus, and resulting child, in perpetuity and irrevocably. Someone had underlined the word irrevocably. Someone had taken a fine black pen and drawn a small line beneath it. Someone had felt it needed emphasis, in a document being handed to the person whose rights it was stripping. Pages 1 through 3 are for the cameras. Page 4 is always where the knife is kept. I marked the margin with my thumbnail, a small crescent, a paralegal's trick, not visible unless you knew to look. I turned to Clause 11. Clause 11 was the one. Every contract has one, the clause whose author forgot that paralegals exist. The intended mother retains sole authority to select embryo characteristics, including but not limited to genetic sex, and reserves the right at her sole discretion to request termination of carriage prior to 24 weeks gestation, should genetic screening results fall outside preferred parameters. I read it. Then I read it again. I did not breathe differently. I had trained myself in 14 years of reading documents in courthouse hallways to not change my breathing in public. Inside my chest, something small closed. A contract that asks you to host a pregnancy with a return window is not a gift. It is a rental agreement. Genetic sex, preferred parameters, sole discretion, termination of carriage. 3 words that turned my body into a vehicle that could be pulled over and emptied if the delivery was the wrong color of wrapping paper. My eyes rose slowly, not to Margaret, to Trevor. Trevor had gone the color of dish soap. His lips were parted. His hand was flat on the table like he was trying to steady a house in an earthquake only he could feel. I looked at my sister. My sister's expression had not changed. She was waiting for me to keep reading. She was not, I understood then, surprised by Clause 11. She had written it, or asked for it, or signed off on it. She knew. I turned to Clause 12. For the first time all evening, my mother would not meet my eyes. Clause 12 was the point of the whole document. Clauses 1 through 11 were the handle. Clause 12 was the blade. So in the event the gestational carrier withdraws her agreement to proceed at any point following the execution of this document, she shall be liable for the full reimbursement of all prior 5F-related costs incurred by the intended parents, in the amount of $118,427, plus reasonable attorney's fees. The exact number, down to the 27 cents. They had not rounded up. They had not rounded down. They had written it with the cents. Someone had wanted the cents. They had not asked me to be a surrogate. They had asked me to sign my way into a cage and paid a lawyer to forge the door. $118,000 if I ever said no, not if I broke the contract, if I withdrew my agreement at any point. As a paralegal, I understood what that meant. After my signature, every future no would cost me everything I had. My apartment, my car, my savings from the divorce settlement, my job probably once they came after my wages. They had wanted to make the no impossible. The contract sat between us like a pot on low heat. Quiet, but you could smell it starting to scorch. I looked down at the page. My thumbnail mark from Clause 10 was still there, a small white indent. I thought of clients I had seen dragged through similar traps, women who signed in good faith and spent 5 years climbing out. I thought of my aunt's orchids on the windowsill. I thought of the blue ink pen in my purse, the pen she had given me at Christmas. I reached for it. I uncapped the pen. The click was louder than it had any right to be. I found Clause 11 on page 4, the selection and rejection clause, the one that asked me to vacate a pregnancy if the child was the wrong gender. And I drew a slow circle around it, not fast, not angry, clean, even pressure. The kind of circle you learn to draw around a clause a judge will need to see, without ambiguity. I finished the circle. I set the pen down on top of the folder, diagonal, across the clauses, the way a sealed witness mark is placed on an evidence document. I closed the folder. I slid it back across the tablecloth with 2 hands, the way you return a casserole dish. Firm, polite, unbroken. I stood up. I picked up my purse. My sister's mouth opened. My mother's hand flew to her own throat. My father's eyes closed once, slowly, as if against a bright light. Trevor did not move. Uncle Don put down his iced tea. I did not raise my voice. I said, I won't be signing this. I won't be discussing this. And I'd like us all to understand. I heard what each of you said tonight. I will not forget it. I walked around the table. I kissed my father on the forehead. Because my Aunt Lillian had once told me in a cold barn in November, dignity is the only thing you cannot take back once you spend it. And you do not give up the chance to bless a man who has knotted himself into smaller and smaller rooms. What my father did not look up. My mother made a small breathy sound. Helena. I walked to the front door. In the living room, Ellie was still watching her movie. A giraffe on the screen. She didn't turn her head. She didn't see. I opened the door. I closed it behind me. I did not slam it. Behind me, as I walked to my car, my sister made the first honest sound she'd made all evening. It wasn't a cry. It was a noise. A small, low animal noise. I heard it through the door. I did not turn around. My sister asked me to give her a child. I gave her my silence instead. And my silence turned out to be louder. I drove home at exactly the speed limit. In my family, that's what people do when they are furious. The Easter sky was a flat, early spring gray. I took Route 29 because it was longer and I needed the long way. My hands on the steering wheel were steady. My face in the rearview mirror was calm. I checked twice. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Margaret, voicemail, 37 seconds. My mother, voicemail, 52 seconds. My father, text. Please come back. Your mother is upset. Uncle Don, silence. He was calculating. I turned the phone face down. I turned the radio on. Patsy Cline on an AM station, singing Crazy. I let Patsy explain the rest of the evening. I passed through town. I didn't go home. I turned left at the blinking yellow light. My aunt's driveway was 10 minutes further. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and put the kettle on without a word. It was 9 o'clock. The orchids caught the porch light. The kitchen smelled like cherry pie, reheated. I sat. I told her everything. The folder, showed the 18 pages, the line about family my mother had rehearsed, Uncle Don and his melting ice, the ham, the brand name vitamins, Clause 11, Clause 12, the circle I had drawn. My aunt listened without interrupting. Her wedding ring caught the overhead light. When I finished, she said, "You did right." Did I? Yes. She poured 2 cups of tea. But it's not done yet, honey. Your sister printed that contract on 18 pages of cardstock. She's going to need it to have been someone else's fault. Watch what she does by Wednesday. What will she do? My aunt's mouth moved in that small, slow way. She'll go public. She's her mother's daughter. I stared into my teacup. I photocopied it, I said after a long moment. The contract, before the weekend. I made a copy at the office on Friday. I had a bad feeling. My aunt smiled. "Oh, Helena," she said. "You have always been your own aunt," Aunt Lillian had said by Wednesday. She had been generous by exactly 1 full day. Tuesday morning, 7:04. My paralegal friend Delea, a screenshot. "Is this about you?" I sat up. I read it. Margaret had posted to Facebook. She had not named me. She had described a close family member, someone I loved, someone I trusted, someone who, after years of being supported by our family, chose, in what Margaret called a deeply painful moment, her own comfort over our family's dream. Margaret wrote about 10 years of trying, her body, her faith, forgiveness, which she said she was actively working toward. 31 comments already. 3 cousins had liked it. A woman named Kelsey from Margaret's book club had written, "I'm so sorry for what you're going through." Margaret had replied with a red heart. My mother had shared the post with the caption, "We are heartbroken, but we trust God." Not a single word was untrue. Not a single word was honest. I made coffee. I read the post 3 times. I read the comments twice. I texted Delea, "Can you come over tonight? I need help redacting an 18-page contract." She replied in 20 seconds. "You want me to go scorched earth?" "No," I wrote. "I want you to help me go paralegal." She said, "On my way after work, bringing Sharpies." Delea arrived at 7:15 with a box of black Sharpies and a bottle of something neither of us was supposed to have on a work night. My kitchen table became a workroom. I laid out the photocopy. 18 pages. Cream cardstock rendered on bright office-grade white. Legible in every line. We worked page by page. Every name, redacted. Every address, redacted. Every signature line, redacted. The law firm's letterhead, redacted. Uncle Don's initials on page 2, redacted. The intended mother's full legal name, redacted. What we left legible, every clause number, every specific word of coercion, the phrase altruistic gestational surrogacy, the word irrevocably, the phrase sole discretion, the phrase termination of carriage, the number $118,427 plus reasonable attorney's fees. The language alone told the story. The language was the indictment. At 10:40, I drafted my statement. I gave myself 180 words. I did not mention my sister. I did not mention my mother. I did not mention family. I wrote, "This is a gestational surrogacy contract I was handed at a family dinner, printed on cardstock, and an asked to sign that same evening without independent counsel. I am a paralegal. I recognize the language on page 4 as coercive. I am sharing this contract, fully redacted of any identifying information, because I believe other women need to know what language to watch for. Please read page 4. Delia read it twice. "Helena," she said, "that is the nicest 18 pages of murder I have ever seen. Thank you." By midnight, 18 pages of black bars, and one small number left legible, $118,427. Because numbers, in my experience, are the only part of a contract that cannot hide. Wednesday, 8 in the morning. I hit post, Facebook, LinkedIn, an anonymous thread on a legal advice forum. I did not tag anyone. I did not name anyone. I attached the redacted PDF and my 180 words. And I made a second cup of coffee. I went to work. By 10, the post had 400 shares. By 2 that afternoon, 3,000. By Thursday, a reproductive rights attorney from Indianapolis had shared it with the caption, "This is a masterclass in why independent counsel matters." In the comments, a woman named Brenda wrote, "This is the contract from Margaret Caldwell's Facebook post from yesterday. I recognize the $118,427. I don't know what to say." Another, "I went to school with Margaret. She's a principal. This cannot be her." A third, "This is her. She talked about IVF at PTA last year." Margaret's Tuesday post disappeared Thursday afternoon. My mother's share, 1 hour later. Uncle Don blocked me on Facebook, LinkedIn, and pointedly, Venmo. By Thursday night, my sister had deleted 7 years of Facebook. Plus, my mother had deleted one. My phone had not stopped buzzing for 16 hours. I did not answer it. I put the kettle on. Thursday evening, 6:47. A knock. I opened the door. Trevor stood on my landing in his work clothes. Gray slacks, navy polo, company lanyard still around his neck. He was holding nothing. "Helena, I'm not here to apologize for her," he said. I did not invite him in. I did not close the door either. I'm here because I should have said something at that table. I knew on page 3. I knew before page 3. He didn't look up from his shoes. "Your mother drafted most of clause 11. She told Margaret it was leverage. She said if you had an out, you would take it, and they needed to close the out." A pause. I wrote that word down in my phone that night. Leverage. I wrote it, and I did nothing with it. I watched his jaw work. "Trevor, yes. Why are you telling me this?" He looked up. "Because I've been married to my wife for 14 years, he said. "And last Sunday at that table, I realized I do not know her." A silence. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "You should tell yourself now. Say it out loud later, in the car. I'm not the one who needs it." He nodded. He didn't cry in my doorway. He waited until he reached the stairwell. I heard him there for a minute. I did not go after him. I closed the door. I turned the deadbolt. I put the kettle on. Trevor was in a Marriott by Friday evening, which in our town is the geographic definition of gone. Sunday, exactly 1 week after Easter. My father came to my apartment alone. No overcoat, no wife. My father had not come anywhere alone. Not in 11 months, not in the 4 years before that. I let him in. I pointed at the secondhand sofa. I made him coffee. He sat with his hands flat on his knees, the way he sat in church. I read what you posted, he said, 3 times, and your mother has been telling me all week that you were being ungrateful, and I nodded. His voice had a small shake in it that was not a performance. I nodded, for 41 years. I did not answer. I did not know what answer would be useful. He looked at his coffee. Tonight, he said, I am telling your mother that I will not sit at a table where something like that folder is allowed. I wanted you to know before I told her. We drank coffee in silence for 11 minutes. It was the longest conversation we had ever had. Summer came. My apartment got light until 9. I taught myself to bake bread badly, and then, after a while, less badly. 3 months after Easter, my father moved out of the master bedroom into the guest room that had, until that week, been my mother's sewing room. My mother did not comment. My father didn't either. Aunt Lillian came to my apartment every Sunday, orchids in one hand, a pie in the other. She watered my windowsill plants without asking. She brought me cuttings. Margaret went silent. She did not post again. She did not call. In June, the school board at Eastview Elementary chose to pursue a new direction for the next academic year. Parents had apparently raised concerns at the April board meeting. The board did not cite me. They did not cite the contract. They did not cite anything by name. They simply did not renew her. I did not celebrate. My mother called once. 1 voicemail, 11 seconds. I hope you're happy, Helena. I deleted it without replying. There was no answer to that sentence that would not have cost me something. One Saturday in August, Delia took me out for my birthday. Booth at a diner on Route 29. We ate pie. She asked offhand over the last bite, Helena, have you ever thought about adoption? I had been waiting 11 months for someone to ask me the question I had not been allowed to ask myself. I began the home study that September. Foster to adopt, through the county. A caseworker named Joanne Reinhold. Warm hands and a ballpoint pen she clicked when she thought. I filled out every form twice. I read the consent documents 3 times. I read the foster placement policies with the same attention I would have given a Clause 11. But I was not taking chances. I told my Aunt Lillian first. She cried. My Aunt Lillian does not cry. She cried into a dish towel at her kitchen sink, and then said, I'll need to put up a second shelf for the orchids. I told my father next. He said, I will be there for every appointment you let me come to. I told Delia. She said, I already knew. I'm buying the crib. I did not tell my mother. I did not tell my sister. The branch of my family that had tried to rent my body was not going to be told about the daughter I was trying to find. 14 months after Easter, a Tuesday afternoon in June, community room, county services building, 2nd floor, tired gray carpet, good afternoon light through the west windows. She was 3 years old. She was wearing a pink dress with a button missing. Her shoes had white scuffs on the toes. While her hair was in 2 uneven braids, she looked at me the way an auditor looks at a spreadsheet. I knelt down, not too close. Hi, I'm Helena. I brought you a giraffe. Do you like giraffes? She considered the giraffe. She considered me. She considered the question. It's soft, she said. I know. She took it. She held it by one ear. She did something with her mouth that was not a smile. And also, not a smile. I did not know yet that by October she would call me Mom. I did not know yet that by Christmas I would not be able to remember what my apartment sounded like without her. I only knew, sitting on tired gray carpet with a 3-year-old evaluating a stuffed giraffe, that something I had not been allowed to hope for was beginning to happen. January, 21 months after Easter, County Courthouse, 2nd floor. And Judge Marvel Hartwell presiding, silver hair, reading glasses on a chain. She had done 3 adoptions that week. Ours was the last of the afternoon. Present in the small courtroom, me, Leona, 3.5, in a yellow dress that had never been worn before, and shiny shoes she kept looking down at. My Aunt Lillian, now 73, in a wool coat the color of a robin's egg. My father, Richard Barrett, who had driven himself. Delia in the back row with a camera. Joanne, Carol, the foster mother, who had asked to come. Absent, my mother, my sister, Uncle Don. None of them had been invited. None of them had tried to come. Judge Hartwell asked Leona, "Are you ready to officially be Leona Barrett?" Leona nodded very seriously. "Yes." The judge smiled. She signed. Delia took a photograph I still keep on my refrigerator. Down in the hallway afterward, my aunt handed me a small pot with a white orchid in it, not yet in bloom. A tight green bud, just showing. "She'll need one of her own," my aunt said. My father picked Leona up. It was the first time he had picked up a grandchild in 8 years. His hands were careful on her back. "Hello, granddaughter." She put her cheek on his shoulder. I said quietly to my aunt, "I did the opposite of what they asked me. I became a mother, without them." My aunt squeezed my hand. "No, honey," she said. "You became a mother because of what you refused. Those are not the same. A kind woman is not a soft woman. She is a woman who has chosen, every morning, not to become the people who hurt her. I chose at 41. I have been choosing every morning since. And if this story landed somewhere in you tonight, if you've ever been handed a folder, a guilt trip, or a history someone else wrote for you, you are allowed to read it slowly. You are allowed to draw a circle. You are allowed to hand it back. And you are allowed to leave. Leave a comment below with the name of the woman in your life who taught you to read page 4. Subscribe if you haven't yet. And tomorrow, there's another story waiting for you in the description. A mother-in-law, a Thanksgiving, and a set of keys she did not expect me to bring back. The kettle's already on.